Hi, this is Chris at Clever Unicorn Games and the Unicorn Collective, back with another one of our interviews. Today I have designer Robert West with me. How are you doing today, Robert?
Pretty good. Pretty solid morning. My dog is staring at me because he's like, "Why am I not outside right now?" But I'm doing pretty good. hmm
So, when you are not designing or playing games, what do you find you're doing with your spare time?
As of late, in particular, a lot of the designing and introducing people to new stuff.
You play a lot and stream a lot of video games. What are your favorites?
A lot of MMOs were the thing primarily. I'm only just transitioning back into it, but I did a lot of Black Desert for a while. I was actually quite recognized for Black Desert. Final Fantasy 14 was a big one, and then a lot of Dark Souls. Dark Souls, the whole franchise, because I am generally a very reserved and calm person in most circumstances. Listening to smooth jazz and playing Dark Souls is sort of a sight for a lot of people who get super frustrated with that franchise. So that was a big thing for me for a long time.
What would you say is your favorite game?
Everdell. um, Everdell is an interesting exploration of pretty much everything I love in a board game. Um, I have played it probably 30 times. I've taught it probably 100 to people who were so resistant to learning it that I am amazed I even pulled it off. Hello. Bub.
Somebody's hungry.
His food's down. He just wants to go outside. All right, buddy. You got to give me some time. Um, yes. So it surprised me. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
When you come to designing a board game and you've got it in your head, you want to put it down to the table, where is it that you start first?
A very simple question I like to ask myself is, what do you enjoy? Like, what, when you think about video games, do you enjoy? Like, what part of it is the thing that you really like? I started out wanting to do uh, digital game design. As a kid, that was the dream. You know, playing. I grew up playing JRPGs and uh, fighting games. In general, fighting games are actually pretty huge in the Black community because they're kind of always been used as kind of this communal meeting place. Grassroots communities in the fighting game community are like the core of the fighting game community. It's all about, like, you literally can't talk about fighting games without saying FGC, and it has the word community in it because it's just so ingrained. So I think about all these games that I grew up with, that I played with, and I really start picking them apart and going, what is it that I actually like about each game? What's different about Street Fighter versus Tekken versus Soul Calibur? Um, and then what are the deviations between the subgenres of a style of game that I like? I could say I like fighting games, but that's anime fighters, that's 2D fighters, that's 3D fighters. And then within the breakdown of that, you have 3D fighters, Soul Calibur and Tekken, both two games made by the same company, but completely different. And so I first like to drill down to those things. And then, like, for example, Tokyo Jungle is a game that I love and am passionate about. And if someone is like, "Oh, I have a PlayStation 3, what should I play?" I will yell at them Tokyo Jungle a million times until they play it. But the question is, why? Like, why do I like Tokyo Jungle? And so I like to dig down into those elements, pick up a thing, and then kind of drop it into this world of, now, what if there was no programming to create this feeling? How do I make it to where a person subconsciously does all of that processing? Because that's kind of what I feel like a board game is. It is a digital game where instead of a CPU, you are using your brain to translate rules into a fluid comprehension of how the world is behaving. Um, and so I was working for a long time, and I still am, on a fighting game. Um, board game that is supposed to kind of capture that Street Fighter, World Warrior feeling. I'm flying around the world learning and training, and then I run into someone else, and I was like, haha, I challenge you. And then you kung fu fight, and then you evaluate what happened there, and then you move to the next thing. And how do you do that with the speed and efficiency of a digital game as a board game? It was interesting because that's one of the moments where I really first learned the value and the substance that comes from playtesting. Because I was at Gen Con with these paper cutouts, in sleeves with, Magic the Gathering lands. And I was at one of the parties and I just set it up to look at it. And this couple comes over and it's like, oh, what's this? Is this the game that's being developed? It's like, oh, it's my passion project because I love fighting games. And they sat down and it turns out that the guy is super into fighting games. He was just like, this is so cool. I feel like I'm playing. And I was like, cool. But then we also learned that, oh, this mechanic is super slow and it doesn't feel snappy. And then this mechanic doesn't feel super fair because the other person feels like they have a crazy advantage. And it's this process of like the whole thing evolving from my very simple start of like, what do I like? What do I enjoy? I enjoy this game. How can I translate that? What mechanics need to be evolved and like how do you connect those dots? And so I think that that's where the process starts. And then it's all about getting as quickly. I learned from a friend of mine, a developer from North Carolina, who has 2 games that have been successfully kickstarted, that you want to just get to playtest as quickly as possible. It's like, think of the idea and then immediately start going, how do I get it to where I can play it today? And then you do that. And then no matter what it is, as long as the vision stays concrete, the feeling of the changes that you make is organic and it works. And like you could play it 3 times in a day, and by the end of it, you will have something where you can play it and you'll enjoy it. And if the vision stays like solid, you'll be like, you'll have that moment of, wow, did I do that? And there's still work, but it's a nice feeling, interesting. Um,
Have you ever played a game that, for some reason, be it mechanic or theme, something hasn't sat right and it's really put you off it?
I pride myself. I've worked really hard on this because I feel like it's an issue in the nerd community on being able to appreciate. I don't. I try not to dislike things. I try to always be able to come around to appreciating a thing because when you come around to appreciation, you bring with you analysis. I have to break down things that I don't like to get past the animalistic, like, because it's not going to kill me. So I shouldn't run away from it. Like, a board game that I don't like isn't going to, like, poison me. It's not like that animal response of flight doesn't apply. So you have to kind of like shut that off and transition into appreciation. Someone worked on this, someone built this, someone put work into this. And at some point in that process, a dot didn't connect. And that can happen to me. So I have to be mindful of the fact that it exists and be respectful of the fact that this designer put work into a thing and something just didn't click, at least for me, right?
How have events in the world, both past and the ones happening right now, affected the way that you design games?
Outside of not having the energy to do some things, um, I think that I have always shied away from associating my creative existence with my physical existence. Um, I have said for a very long time that the least distinct and important a descriptor about me as a person in the work that I do is that I am Black, which has almost always been a lie. Um, as a kid, I taught myself conversational Japanese and programming because I really like JRPGs. I want to make something that makes someone feel as happy as this makes me feel. So I sat in elementary school, and when I would get home, I would get online, dial up, and like print up massive reams worth of like stuff from the internet to try to just sit and figure out this language that everybody was telling me was the hardest language in the world. And then in 2003, I started playing Final Fantasy 11. And I don't know your relationship with like retro MMOs, but Final Fantasy 11 uh, had integrated servers. Every way you played that game and every nation you played it from played on the same server. So right around 11 to 4 a.m., the chat would turn entirely Japanese, and I would get to practice. So all through high school, I would occasionally have a test that I failed because I would fall asleep taking it because I had been up all night talking Japanese to people to play this MMO. Um, and that's irregular. I was a black kid in an all black school who listened in full Japanese to like albums and like could actually like watch anime and pick things up. And that never really stopped. I was in advanced placement, oil and gas at a very young age. And all this time I was designing games and different projects and trying to get into content creation. It never really came together until like 2012 when I actually started doing some Twitch stuff. Um, I feel like these days the major thing that has changed is that I won't say that it's a lack of fear because I experienced while streaming how different it is when you are black or Asian or female to try to stream and the kind of, oh, well, we all have to deal with that sort of like attitude that the kind of like cishet Caucasian community has in response to like minority or queer individuals trying to get into content creation. The response and the negativity that is had is kind of primal. I had people who, like when I streamed Black Desert, I had people who literally put out hits to hunt me. Like they would put people in my chat and they would like find where I was on the server, even if I like hid the stuff. And they would literally just, I would be walking to farm. Like that's a game that has a lot of open world PvP, which is like a thing that the community really enjoys. Um, but it can be used in very abusive and terrible ways. And when someone will spend 3 hours killing you over and over and over again while you're trying to farm sunflower seeds, it's kind of this escalation that doesn't just come from someone not liking the way you talk to them. You know, it's not from someone not liking that you're the most popular. It's something primal and visceral to where not only that person, but a whole drove of people that they have amped up will come at you. And like I wasn't even I would say that I was in the top 5 streamers for that game at the time, but I wasn't the best. I wasn't number 1 and I didn't talk about PvPing like I was the best fighter. So it was this primal, visceral, like animalistic hatred that fueled that. And it was days and days and days of it until I eventually had to just stop playing the game. Um, I think that the major thing that has changed in my design work, in my creative work, even in my streaming and content creation as I get back into that now, is that I'm a lot less reticent to go, I am a black man who is creating things and doing things, and you have to deal with that. Like, you know, it's one of those things. Is I'm a lot more like, yeah, yeah, and that's kind of where it is, like, because you can't. I won't say it's interesting because I won't say that it is a responsibility because no one should be called to. I don't feel that it's fair that in the creative world that these subsets of individuals are forced to preoccupy themselves with this intense and immense amount of like social resistance to them thriving, and then for everyone else to go, well, we're all dealing with the same things as creatives. It's like, are we? Like, I feel like I like since all of this stuff started, even actually since COVID, I've kind of had these weird moments of just realizing how much extra work goes into trying to create as a black individual, especially like I would take my identification and go cishet, straight guy, pretty easy. I don't find my relationship with my sexuality or identity super complex. I think we all, as a species, need to accept that we all have conversations with ourselves about our perspectives, about who we are. And is this me? Is this part of me? And I think that there's a lot more on the fringes that connects with like the queer community and those identities than some people want to admit because it's threatening to them.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody thinking about designing their first board game?
Play everything, like literally everything. Um, and that's like play the weird, your friend mentioned some weird My Little Pony game, and you're like a bodybuilder with a giant beard. Play that game. Like one of the games that I feel was the most weirdly formative games for me is a game called Kittens in a Blender. Like I think it was discontinued. I don't think you can even buy it anymore. But I played that game, and I want to say it was right around when I wrote my manuscript. I wrote like a weird sci-fi manuscript in 2013. It was before I moved to Los Angeles, so probably 2011. Uh, I think so. I think it was before, and something just clicked. Like I played it, and I was like, "This is stupid," and then I started laughing. I was like, "This is this is so stupid," and then I started really enjoying myself, and then I had to play it again, and I played it like with a couple of friends at like a coffee shop. It wasn't like a board game night or anything. And I couldn't for years. I could not get it out of my head. Like what made this game so engaging? And it's not the greatest game in the world, but there was just something about the fact that someone sat down and was like, "I want to make a game, and it's all about kitten, and you can either save a kitten by putting it in a box, or you can get rid of the kittens, putting them in a blender, and whenever the blend card comes up, the blender starts, and any cats in it, whether they're yours or someone else's, are gone." And I was like, that is such a ridiculous and insane concept, but it worked. And I think that if someone told me what that game was and was like, "You will really like this because I know you're really into board games and you'll enjoy it and it'll be cool," and I'd be like, "No, I'm just gonna sit here and play Dominion. Thank you, but no." And like, but it happened just randomly, and I was kind of into the girl, so I was like, "Yeah, I'll play. I'll play it." That whole like, I had a motivating factor to get me past that mental like, "Oh, this is silly" block, and just enjoyed it. I think that you learn a lot by just exploring and appreciating things. They say that I guess it's kind of a Zen concept. I'm gonna have to like super paraphrase the thing that I'm thinking about because I don't think I'm thinking of the actual quote. But essentially, that the easiest way to never find a thing is to constantly look for it. You never find a real understanding and appreciation for the complexities of design work and the nuances of it by staring at a thing going, "Nuances, reveal yourself." Like they don't respond well to commands. They're very defiant, nuances are. So what you have to do is you have to kind of lay in the garden. Like the butterfly doesn't land on your nose because you're swatting in the air trying to catch it. It lands on your nose because you find peace and you settle into the moment. And then it doesn't realize you're there because you're part of the moment. And I think that to create moments, you have to be able to become part of a moment. You kind of have to find peace with just experiencing. Um, I really like whenever someone tells me that a game is super bad, like board game or digital game, playing it. Like I love Superman 64. It's fantastic. Like cuz it's a masterclass in no. Like it's a masterclass in like look up the history of it. Look up why it's that way. The Super Mario movie. Look up the history of it. Look at why it's that way. Understand it, and you develop this weird appreciation for it. I grew up watching a lot of really bad horror movies, my family is really big into watching a movie and talking over it and like making fun of it. So with them, in the right evenings when we're not like having whatever issues, it's all just any movie can be a comedy with the right group of people. And so when you start to kind of develop this idea that like if it's not good, it was just meant to be funny. You start to be able to rest in these moments of just malcontentment and frustration with a thing being bigger than something that maybe you could have created. Like, why is this here? Another Earth, I think, is the sci-fi show that Netflix put out. It is probably one of the worst sci-fi shows I have ever seen. But if I look at it as a satire and a cautionary tale about how to really r- how to write good characters and how to be socially aware and how to like be cognizant of like your characters all acting like high school students when they are supposed to be the world's best astronauts sent on a mission to save us from a strange, mysterious alien threat. Like, you have these moments of just like giggling to yourself and laughing and going, well, this character story arc doesn't make any sense because this, and this. It's really actually kind of funny that it almost fits like a punchline to a joke how off it is. But I didn't analyze that sitting there going, "Oh, how dare you? I'm so mad." I just watched the show and kind of enjoyed it for what it was, and then I came out of it going, if I was going to write the same story, I could do this, and that probably would actually fix these things." You have to respect that they're not idiots. Like, like no, no, you don't become a writer for like a sci-fi show that ends up on Netflix. You don't like become a published board game designer being completely unaware of what you're doing. But there are a lot of things that can come up in the process that will distract you from what you're doing. Your vision can be marred, your direction can be skewed, and ultimately you end up at a place that's not even remotely where you wanted. But to learn the lessons that they had to learn the hard way, you have to look at what they did and not discount them as less than you. Because you can never learn something from someone who you look at and think is less than. Um, and I think that the biggest advice that I can have to someone is to look at every designer as though they are the smartest person in the world and be respectful of what they create, because there's something in the process of them making something you don't like that will help you make something that you do. And I think that learning from other people's mistakes or learning from the success of things that you don't like is important. Like, I have to look at games that I really don't enjoy to understand why they're successful so that I can create things that are better to demonstrate that we don't have to do the things that I don't like to make things that are good. And I think that that's super important too.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to me today, Robert. This has been brilliant, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thanks. I really appreciate you finding the time for me. I was really looking forward to this, and it turned out to be just as fantastic as I was expecting.